Hello, welcome to lesson 8. I had a question about number 54, and I'll work my way through that one. So it says the drum in a clothes dryer has a diameter of 0.7 meters, which would translate to a radius of 0.35 meters. It completes one cycle every 0.42 seconds, so that is the period. So capital T is 0.42 seconds. So A, what is the centripetal acceleration of the drum? This formula you'll find, it's in my notes. It's not on the cheat sheet under kinematics and dynamics. It's not a formula. This is not the type of question I would likely put on a test. It's kind of a build up to the questions I want to do. So if you look in your notes, you'll find the formula to be, what do we want? Centripetal accelerations right there, and we got the period. So centripetal acceleration is 4 pi squared r over the period squared. So that is the formula that we would use. Plugging in the information then, 0.35 over the period squared, 0.42 squared, and plugging that into my calculator, I get an answer of 78 meters per second squared inward or toward the middle. All right, so there's the answer to A part. Now B part, why do the clothes not fly toward the center of the clothes dryer? So let's see if I can explain that. So if we look at, here's our dryer drum, here's the center, here's my piece of clothing. Okay, so my piece of clothing has an acceleration toward the center of the drum. So that's the direction acceleration, so centripetal acceleration points. That's the direction our clothing wants to fall. It also, because the drum is rotating, there's a tangential velocity, v. So what happens here is kind of like a step method. So the clothing, if you think of projectile motion, the clothing will fall a certain amount of distance in that time frame, but it's also moving horizontally, so it's also moved over here, and it's located on the drum. All right, at that point, there's a centripetal acceleration, but there's a tangential velocity. So now the piece of clothing will fall a certain distance depending on the time, but because it is moving tangentially, it's also going to move to this direction to its new location. So you start to see that the clothes are constantly falling toward the center of the drum, but because of the combination of the tangential velocity, it falls to the middle of the drum, but it's moving horizontally. And I'm doing it in bigger steps. If we did it in small steps, infinitely small steps, we would see the clothes never actually leave the drum. So what's happening is this series of very small movements toward, oops, that one didn't make sense, that motion there, but you can see that every time it tries to fall to the center, the tangential velocity then sticks it back on the outside of the drum. So it's constantly falling toward the center of the drum, but its horizontal velocity or tangential velocity sends it sideways like projectile motion, which then keeps it to the wall of the drum. So it's a series of infinitely small falls and moves toward the tangential velocity direction. Hopefully that makes sense. It's the same thing with the Earth satellite. So we could put Earth in the middle here, and that's why a satellite never falls to Earth if it's in orbit, because that tangential velocity will send it out, and it does that step pattern, keeping it in its orbit. All right, that's kind of a simplified explanation as to why our acceleration is toward the middle and why objects like clothes in the clothes dryer do not fall toward the middle. Hopefully that helps with the explanation and makes sense. If you have any further questions, let me know, and I'll try to clarify.